Hi, I'm Maria May from the Casting On Couch, and this is my step-by-step guide for the Chunky Twisted Rib Beanie. Written instructions to this video series can be purchased from my website. See the description. Do not miss my future uploads in this Chunky Twisted Rib series. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications, and that way you'll never miss a stitch. So, let's begin. Now this hat will fit all adults. It's extremely stretchy, so will fit men and women. Now, the length of this hat, when measured flat, you can expect your hat to finish 10.5 inches, 26.5 centimetres, and the width, bearing in mind it's not stretched, when measured flat, the circumference is 44 centimetres. That would be 17.25 inches there in circumference. I'm using Freedom wool. It's a chunky yarn requiring a 10mm needle, so for results similar to mine, marry the ball band tension. Now this is colour 435, which is no longer in the current range, but I do have some suggestions that you might like. These are my favourite colours in the current range. We've got Blossom and Vintage Rose. Look, how stunning are they? Using a 9mm circular needle initially, cast on 63 stitches plus 1, so that's a total of 64 stitches. I've used the long tail cast on here, so if you're unsure how to achieve the long tail cast on, then see my beginner's guide in the description below. So it's very important before we go any further that you check all your stitches are aligned and not sort of twisting over and doing that kind of thing. You want to make sure that they all look even and untwisted. Now what I want you to do initially is just bring through the cable and just bring up onto the left needle just a few stitches. This will enable us to do this little tip that helps improve the look of the round. We want to slip what is the first stitch over onto the right needle, and then what we're going to do is slip this last stitch over the first stitch like so, and tighten everything up, and then we're going to slip this back over onto the left needle, and then I want you to get a marker and place it on the right hand side. Now what we need to do is just push all this back down again so we can see what's going on, and then at the approximate halfway point, say here, we want to bring through the wire or cable again. And this is what's known as the magic loop technique, because my circular needle is sort of overly long. So bring those stitches up onto the left needle and then slip the others down. And then I'm just going to do a final check that all that's nice and tidy and not twisted, which it seems to be fine. Actually, I mustn't pull that too tightly. So we're going to begin, bring this yarn now to the front, because our first stitch of round 1 is going to be a purl stitch. So enter into the front of the stitch and purl 1. Let's just tighten that up a little bit. Take the yarn to the back and knit 2. And those 3 stitches, that is basically the repeat pattern, purl 1, knit 2, and we're going to do that throughout the entire round. So purl 1 and knit 2. What I thought I would do is show the first 2 rounds in full so that you can see exactly what's going on here. Yarn to the front, purl 1, and I must remember to take my time so that beginner knitters can see. So now I'm knitting 2, bring the yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, and yarn to the back, knit 2. Now your halfway point is best to finish after a knit 2 or after a purl 1, because you'll see later in the next round why it's best to divide the work so that your cable pattern on the next round can be formed properly. So I'm bringing up the second half on the left needle and I'm trying to slip the work just done down onto the cable needle. So carry on in pattern. So I'm purling 1, and at the junction of the 2 halves here I'm trying not to pull too tightly or in fact have it so loose. Yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2. So I hope that in showing you in full the first 2 rounds, it will give you confidence in establishing this 2 row main repeat pattern. Purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, and we should end the round by knitting 2, so we know that we've done this correctly. So I'm going to place that marker over onto the right, and I'm going to slip the stitches that have just been worked down and then bring up the first half again onto the left needle. Now I'm just double checking that all that looks untwisted. Now let's begin round 2. So I've got the yarn to the front, because our first stitch is going to be a purl 1. So again, I'm trying not to draw it too tightly or too loosely. Yarn to the back. Now these next 2 stitches, we are going to do a 2-stitch right cross, and what we're going to do is knit the second stitch and then the first, and this will twist the stitches out of sequence and create, in fact, what is a cable. So enter into the second stitch like so, and bring the yarn as if to knit, pull through, but leave it on the left needle, and then knit the first stitch and pull through. Then we can slip those 2 stitches off the left needle, and that's our 2-stitch right cross, and that purl 1 2-stitch right cross is repeated throughout the entire round. Yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, 2-stitch right cross. So maneuver your needle into the second stitch, and it's very awkward and tight, especially on the initial few rounds. Knit, enter into the first stitch, knit, and then take off those 2 stitches. Now purl 1. Now if you're a beginner knitter and you're finding that a bit tough, what you can do is get a nice chunky cable needle. What I'm going to use is actually a circular needle, but it does the job in exactly the same way. So with this circular needle acting as my cable needle, I'm going to slip the next stitch onto it and hold it at the back of the work. Then knit 1, slip the stitch from the cable needle onto the left needle and then knit that. So that is another way of achieving exactly the same stitch. Now purl 1, yarn to the back, 2 stitch right across, purl 1. So I'm going to just carry on and work with you. So we'll do, like I say, these 2 rounds in full so you can see what's going on. Purl 1, 2 stitch right across, 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 purl 1, and 2 stitch right across, purl 1, and 2 stitch right across. So you can see it's important, you know, where your break is in the work, because you need to form that 2 stitch right across, so it can't happen really in the middle of those knit stitches there. So let's slide that down and bring up the next half of the round. So gently encourage those up onto the left needle. Now we ended on a 2 stitch right across, the yarn's in front, perfect. Swing this needle around and then we can purl 1, yarn to the back, 2 stitch right across, purl 1, and 2 stitch right across, purl 1, and 2 stitch right across, purl 1, two stitch right across, purl 1, stitch right across, purl 1, very near the end now, 2 stitch right across, purl 1, 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 and end the round with a 2 stitch right across, and then we can reposition our marker. So those 2 rounds form the main pattern. So let's take a little look. This is what we have so far. What I want you to do is repeat rounds 1 and 2 once more with this 9mm needle. So I'm bringing up my first half, yarn at the front. Remember we began, so this is as round 1, so we purl 1, then knit 2, and we repeat that throughout the entire round. So I'll show you another time. Purl 1 and knit 2. So join me at the end of this round. So this is round 3 we're working on here, which is exactly the same as round 1. So I'm showing you the last few stitches of this round, and we will be ending this round by knitting 2. And there are my last 2. So this will be round 4 that we're doing. Now round 4 is a 2 stitch right cross round, and it is exactly the same as round 2. So I've got the yarn to the front because our first stitch, remember, is a purl 1, and then yarn to the back. So next we're going to do a 2 stitch right cross, so work into the second stitch and knit, and then into the first stitch, knit, and then take both stitches off the left needle, and we're going to repeat that throughout the round. So that would be round 4, so it's exactly the same as round 2. So 2 stitch right across. So join me at the end of this round and we will just clarify what happens at the end. So approaching the end of this round, still doing the 2 stitch right crosses, and we'll end on a 2 stitch right cross. So that's round 4. I'm going to slip those stitches down. So this is what we have so far. I'm going to bring up a new half. I'm going to now introduce a 10mm circular needle. I'm going to slip that marker over. So now what I want you to do is repeat round 1, except you are working this entire round onto larger needles. So purl 1 and knit 2. So I'm nearly at the end of this round, so this will be the equivalent of round 5, which is the same as round 1. And then all the stitches will be onto these larger 10mm needles. So I'm expecting that your marker may have fallen off, so if it's anything like mine, so replace the marker and just keep going with the main repeat pattern. Keep repeating rounds 1 and 2 until you have built up a total of 30 rounds. The work so far measures approximately 8 inches, that's just over 20 centimetres. So this is round 31, a decreasing round, and we are going to begin by purling 1, knitting 2, next knit 2 together, so enter into the second stitch on the left needle, followed by the first, and bring the yarn around and knit through both. Next, knit 2 together through the back of the loop. So this time I position my needle into the base of the stitches and what I'm really after is the backs, because as the name suggests, we're working through the back of the loops, like so. I hope you can see that. Then bring the yarn around and knit the 2 stitches together. So that's knit 2 together through the back loop, and now knit 2. And that little sequence there we're going to keep repeating throughout the round. So begin by purling 1, then knit 2, 1, and now knit 2 together, so enter into the second stitch followed by the first, knit 2 together, then knit 2 together through the back of the loops, and knit 2. So that's our second set completed. Keep repeating that sequence. Begin by purling 1 and knit 2, next knit 2 together, and then knit 2 together through the back loops and knit 2. So I'm going to bring up the next portion. So again, begin by purling 1, knitting 2, knit 2 together, next knit 2 together through the back of the loops, and knit 2. Purl 1, knit 2, knit 2 together, then knit 2 together through the back of the loops. Sometimes if I do that first, and that enlarges the stitches so that I can enter easily, and knit 2. Right, I think I'll bring up the last little portion of work. So purling 1, knitting 2, knit 2 stitches together, knit 2 together through the back loops. I'm just going to stretch that a little bit. So knit 2 together through the back of the loop, and knit 2. Purl 1, knit 2, knit 2 together, and knit 2 together through the back of the loops, and we end by knitting 2. So that's round 31 completed, our first decrease round. Round 32, we are going to begin by purling 1, and then we've got 3 sets of cabling. So we're going to do a 2-stitch right cross, followed by a second 2-stitch right cross, and then a third 2-stitch right cross. So if you see, we've got a purl 1, and then we've got 3 lots of 2-stitch right crosses, and that's the main pattern repeat for this round. So purl 1, and then 3 sets of 2-stitch right cross. That's 1 set, 2 sets, and 3 sets, and repeat again. So bringing the yarn to the front, purl 1, and 3 lots of 2-stitch right cross. So that's 1 lot, 2 lots, lots there of 2 stitch right crosses. So let's bring up some more stitches. So with my new stitches I can keep going and purl 1 and then do 3 lots of 2 stitch right crosses. So that's 1 lot, 2 lots, and 3 lots there. Purl 1 and again 2 stitch right cross for 3 sets. So that's 1, 2, 3, purl 1 and 2 stitch right cross again. That's once and that's twice. So when I bring up my final portion, that will be my 3rd set. So that's my 3rd set. So again, this is the last repeat. Purl 1, 2 stitch right cross, a second lot of 2 stitch right crosses, and lastly my 3rd and final set for this round. So that's round 32. Now round 33 is a little bit more straightforward. We can begin by purling 1 and then knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and repeat that sequence throughout the entire round. Purl 1 and knit 6. That's 4, 5, 6. Purl 1 and knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and keep going all the way to the end. So continuing on, purl 1 and knitting 6. So purling 1 and knitting 6. So coming to my last repeat, purling 1 and knitting 6. So that would be round 33. Round 34, a decrease round. Now we are going to begin the round by purling 1. Next, 2 stitch right cross. Now we're going to do a twisted rib decrease. So this decrease will suggest the flow of the pattern but act as a decrease. And what I want you to do is first knit 1 and then I want you to slip it back over onto the left needle, and then I want you to pass the second stitch over the stitch that you've just moved over, and then you can move that stitch back onto the right needle. So I've called that a twisted rib decrease. Next, 2 stitch right cross. And that sequence just shown is repeated throughout the round. So begin by purling 1, next 2 stitch right cross, and then do the twisted rib decrease. So remember, knit 1 first, then slip it back over onto the left needle and pass the second stitch on the left needle over it and slip back onto the right needle. 2 stitch right cross. So that's 2 repeats and 2 decreases completed. So purl 1, 2 stitch right cross, and twisted rib decrease. So knit 1, slip it back over onto the left needle, pass the second stitch over it, and then move that stitch back over onto the right needle. 2 stitch right cross. So we've got 3 sets worked. And keep going. Purl 1, 2 stitch right cross, and let's bring some more stitches. So I have my new stitches. So knit 1 and slip it back so that we can create our twisted rib decrease. So pass the second stitch over the first on the left needle and then slip it back again onto the right needle, and 2 stitch right cross. And again, begin by purling 1, and next we're going to do a 2 stitch right cross, then create our decrease, so knitting one, slipping it back over, passing the second stitch over the first, and then slipping it back again, and 2 stitch right across. And begin again, so purl 1, 2 stitch right across, create a twisted rib decrease, so knit one first, then slip it back over onto the left needle. Now pass the second stitch on the left needle over it and slip the remaining stitch back over, and 2 stitch right across. And for the last set, purl 1, and 2, getting a bit tangled up, so 2 stitch right across, and next our twisted rib decrease, so knit one and slip it back over, pass, slip stitch over, slip it back again, and we end the round with a 2 stitch right across. So that's round 34. So let's do a little stitch count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. So after that round we have 42 stitches. Now for round 35, I'm going to be reintroducing a 9mm circular needle on this round. So in fact we can just remove that marker temporarily. And what I want you to do is begin by purling 1 and next we're going to knit 5. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we are going to repeat that little sequence all the way to the end. So purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So continuing on and beginning with a purl 1 and knitting 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and keep going, knit 5, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. Now I've got 2 little stitches here, I need to bring those up. Purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and knit 5. And when you have all your stitches on your slightly smaller needle, we can reintroduce our little marker. So I'm going to slip that back on to the end there. So that's round 35. So round 36 now. We're going to maintain the pattern, and at the same time we're going to remember that we do have fewer stitches, so we can't quite achieve the pattern in exactly the same fashion. So I've purled 1, so 2 stitch right across, and next knit 1 and 2 stitch right across. And repeat that sequence to the end. So purl 1, 2 stitch right across, knit 1 and 2 stitch right across, and repeat again. So purl 1, 2 stitch right across, and let's bring up some more. So next we can knit 1 and then 2 stitch right across, purl 1, 2 stitch right across, knit 1 and 2 stitch right across, and keep going. So purl 1, 2 stitch right across, knit 1 and 2 stitch right across, and begin again. Purl 1. Now I need to bring up those last few stitches, and 2 stitch right across, knit 1 and 2 stitch right across. Next, purl 1, 2 stitch right across, knit 1 and end with a 2 stitch right across. So that's round 36. Round 37. Begin by purling 1 and next knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and repeat that throughout. So begin by purling 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep going right up until the end. So I have a few stitches here to bring up still. So begin by purling 1 and knitting 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1 and knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purl 1, knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So that's round 37. Round 38. So we're going to be decreasing again on this round. Begin by purling 1 and then do a twisted rib decrease. So remember, we knitted 1 first and then slipped it back, and then we slipped the second stitch on the left needle over the first stitch and slipped it back over and knit 1, and next create a twisted rib decrease again. So we're knitting the first stitch, slipping it back over, and then slipping the second stitch off the left needle over the first stitch and slipping it back over. And we're going to repeat that sequence throughout the entire round. So purl 1 and then decrease, so knitting 1, slipping it back over and slipping that stitch over, and slipping the stitch back onto the right needle, knit 1 and again decrease, so knit 1, then slip it back over and slip that second stitch over before we slip it back onto the right needle, and again purl 1 and decrease, so we are knitting 1, then slipping the stitch back over, passing the second stitch over the first and slipping it back, knit 1, and then do our special decrease again, so knit 1, slip it back over, pass the second stitch over the first stitch on the left needle and slip it back over onto the right. So we can carry on and purl 1 and create our special decrease, So knit one, slip it back onto the left needle, slip the second stitch over it, and slip back again onto the right. Knit one, decrease again, so knitting one, then slipping it back over, passing that stitch over, and then slipping it back onto the right needle. Purl one, oop, there, and decrease again, knit one, slip the stitch back onto the left needle, pass the second stitch over the first, and then slip it back onto the right needle, knit one, decrease again, so knitting one, slipping it back over, passing that stitch over the first, slipping it back onto the right needle, and repeat again. Purl one, then decrease, so we're knitting that stitch, passing it back over onto the left needle, passing that stitch over, slipping it back, knit one, and again decrease, so knit one, pass that stitch back over, pass slip stitch over, slip it back onto the right, purl one, and we've got our last decrease here, so knit one, then pass it back over, pass the second stitch over the first, and then slip it back onto the right needle, and then knit one. And now for our final decrease, so knitting one, then slipping it back over to the left needle and passing that second stitch over it and slipping it over. So that's round 38. And if we do a little stitch count, we have now got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. We have 28 stitches. Round 39, begin by purling one and then knit 3. So that's 1, 2, 3, and repeat that sequence throughout the entire round. So purl 1 and knit 3, purl 1 and knit 3, and let's bring up some more stitches and carrying on by purling 1 and knitting 3, purling 1 and knitting 3, purling 1 and knitting 3, purling 1 and finally knitting 3. So that's round 39. Now for round 40, a decrease round. We're going to begin by purling 1, and then next I want you to knit 3 together. So your next 3 stitches on the left needle, insert through all 3 and knit them together, and repeat that throughout the round. So purl 1, and knit 3 together, purl 1, and knit 3 together, and keep going with that decrease and continuing on. Purl 1 and knit 3 together, purl 1 and knit 3 stitches together, purl 1 and knit 3 together, purl 1 and end by knitting 3 together. You should have 14 stitches remaining. Now for round 41, we are simply going to purl 1 and then knit 1, and then we're going to keep repeating those 2 stitches. So purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So if I bring up my remaining stitches, and then I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and ending with a knit 1. So that's round 41. So round 42, this will be our final decrease round. So I'm going to knit 2 together, so going through 2 stitches on the left needle and knitting them together, and I want you to repeat that throughout. So by the time we've finished, we'll have 7 stitches. So that's 3. Let's bring up the remaining stitches there, and keep knitting them together. So let's remove the marker. Our work is kind of done here. We now need an embroidery needle. Now to finish, what I want you to do is get an embroidery needle and then go through the centre of each stitch. So carefully bring up your first few stitches place your needle and allow the yarn to run through the middle, and ensure that each stitch is definitely caught by your needle. And then we see what this looks like from above. We can gently just draw in those stitches there and create a nice sort of little star finish to the top of the crown. So I might go through again, and then when I'm happy with the way it looks, I will finish the work on the inside. Create an oversized pom-pom and attach to complete your project. I'd like to thank you for watching.